Reform now in control of 10 different councils and also two moralities as well. Well, among the councillors who was elected last Thursday, I'm delighted to say, is my old mate, Darren Grimes, Reform UK councillor for Durham County Council. Let's welcome him to the show. Very good afternoon to you, Councillor Grimes.
A very good afternoon, Julia. Thank you very much for having me on.
I'm very excited. I wasn't very happy when you moved back home when we lost you from London, but don't get to see you as often anymore. But one of my Brexit heroes and a good friend. I'm very, very excited for you. How sure were you were going to win that seat? Were you one of those like going, yeah, this is a walk in the park, or were you surprised by not just your victory but the scale of victory?
No, I think by nature, Julia, I'm actually quite sort of, reserved when it comes to viewing these things as a slam dunk. I never, ever operate like that. But what I would say, though, is that all of the pollsters and the pundits, they had us on, 300 seats. Certainly 500 would be looking immediately very positive, but to get 677, nobody predicted that. Okay. Nobody saw that coming. And I think actually, Julia, it goes to the very heart of all the issues that you've just been mentioning there. I mean, you touched on the fact that net zero isn't really a local election issue. Well, hang on, I have to tell you, Julia, the spending, for example, take potholes as one example. The spending on electric JCBs to fill these potholes is huge, right? And that's because of a net zero commitment. Yeah. So it really does impact the pound and pence spent at a local level as well as a national one.
That's a very good point, actually. And when people talk about these estimates of the cost of net zero to people, oh, it's an extra £200 on your electricity, your energy bill. But actually, no, it's not. It's all those costs that all the businesses have and all those commitments, not just the net zero officers, but every single commitment on those issues. And all of that ends up being paid for either by the taxpayer or us as consumers. So it all feeds back to us in the end.
Absolutely right, yeah. And the other issues, the visa crackdowns and all these other things, well, for local government, that's been having a real impact, actually, on the allocation of houses and resources. Because don't forget that as soon as you accept one of these, when one is forced upon you, that actually you've got to pay for everything from translation costs to the education of the children. Yeah. So the cost to the taxpayer is always massive. Local elections really do matter, and I think people really understood that in this election.
Well, let's talk about some of those key issues where reform has been doing well. I'll start with the immigration issue. There are two separate ones. One is the illegal migrants coming across the channel, and we had these interviews over the weekend with senior figures in reform, basically saying, look, we're basically going to play the game that Republicans have played in America, which is like, we're going to ship out, the Democrats basically saying, oh, we're in favour of all these migrants coming over from Mexico. Well, okay, you can have them then. Send them to Martha's Vineyard and the playgrounds of the lefty rich. Funnily enough, they don't like it. I mean, that's the reality, isn't it? Actually, a lot of these people are shipped into places where, the Labour great and good and the Lib Dem great and good don't actually live. So what is the policy there in terms of the illegal migrants, the boat migrants?
Yeah, so certainly HMOs are a problem in our neck of the woods.
This is houses of multiple occupancy.
Exactly,
so
yes.
Hostels, effectively.
Yeah, and the creation of them. So, for example, I can think of a former bank that has been transformed into, housing 7 men, for example, where actually if you imagine you, Julia, in a working class area of County Durham, and you find out that next door to you and your daughter is a family is a set of 7 fighting age men moving in next door. Mm-hmm. I'm not sure you'd be best pleased about it, but for saying that for such a long time, you've been smeared as being racist, bigoted, xenophobic, whatever else. And now Labour expect us to say, oh, well, they understand it now. They get it. They're going to stop handing out these visas like confetti to those from countries who don't share our culture, our values and our views. But I'm not convinced, actually, that the Labour government won't continue to use its statutory powers to actually force us to take in these people. So what we will do is use every single instrument in our power to delay, obfuscate, to actually go around saying no to doing this. And you know what? If the party was to bus people down to number 10 Downing Street, I'd personally cheer them on and wave them off.
So be it. And that's the reality. I've always said if we had the challenge channel migrants, you're these undocumented men of fighting age turning up from Somalia, Afghanistan, goodness knows where. We don't know. They throw away their documentation. You buy up all the houses in Keir Starmer's street, apart from his house, and you put them in those houses. I think he'd change his tune very, very quickly, and that's the reality. And then you can shout bigot and racist and xenophobe as many people as you want. People don't want it, they don't like it, quite understandably. But that's obviously different from the people who have arrived here legally on visa and study visas, who then miraculously, the visa finishes after 2 years, 3 years. They go, oh, turns out I need political asylum now, I can't go home. Should any of those people be staying in the country?
Well, I mean, we've got the absurdity now. You've been covering it this morning, where actually the US might be sending people to Rwanda paid for by the British taxpayer. So, you know, the whole thing is a total farce. And the asylum and migration policies have been mismanaged in the extreme. And it's impacted not just us culturally, but economically massively too. I'm not sure that anyone coming here on for example, a student visa, they're claiming asylum after the event. I'm not sure that ought to be acceptable, and the government, His Majesty's government, Sir Keir Starmer's government, have actually said themselves that they're going to tighten up the rules around this.
But again, when they say they're going to tighten them, what does that actually mean? I mean, bearing in mind, we're looking at 30% of those asylum applications are from people who are already here but were here on a legal visa. So it's on a huge scale.
It's an industrial scale, absolutely. And these routes, Julia, are being exploited for that deliberate reason, because once you're in the country, the likelihood of you being told to leave again is very slim indeed, because actually the human rights monopoly, the human rights factory, has actually made people very, very wealthy indeed. So I don't trust the vested interests. And let's not forget what Sir Keir Starmer was in a former life too.
Indeed, a human rights lawyer, of course. Let's also talk about winter fuel allowance, because the front page of The Guardian today, you know, Pippa Crerar, you know, the political editor there, very well connected, saying that, you know, government's possibly looking at some sort of change, a U-turn, a semi-U-turn, on the winter fuel allowance payments. Basically, 10 million pensioners lost out. Some of them very well-off pensioners, many of them, though, just above the poverty line. People who weren't getting pensioner credit, often or not even didn't know they were eligible for it, really missing out on that £300 a year, you know, for the extra bills in the winter. Turns out that, you know, if you poll people on that, that is the biggest cut-through policy that Labour have had since they've got into power, and it makes people angry on every side of the political divide. Some cabinet ministers apparently saying to journalists they believe that is their equivalent of the Tory poll tax in terms of how damaging it is. Do you think any sort of reset of that, any version of a U-turn, means testing it, whatever they did, do you think anything that Labour could do on that would actually undo the damage that policy has done?
No, I'm not convinced that it would actually, Julia, because I think the optic has already set in. I mean, for example, yesterday watching the Prime Minister sat alongside veterans who had served in World War II for 80 years on from VE Day, actually looking at him being sat with them whilst acknowledging that this is the Prime Minister that has stripped them of their winter fuel payments. You know, people that served our country and reclaimed its freedom or protected its freedom. It didn't sit well with me whatsoever. So this big brain idea actually to cut winter fuel payments to look good from an economic standpoint, well, actually no, all you did was say we're happy to spend £4 to £5 billion on asylum for those who've come here illegally, but those who've worked all their lives, chucking taxpayer cash at bogus asylum claims and all the other things we've already mentioned. And now we're meant to believe that after getting totally spanked at the ballot box, they're suddenly all for our pensioners and our elderly. They made clear they couldn't give a flying flamingo.
I was just going to say, edit whatever you're going to say. For goodness sake. So people just aren't going to trust them, you say. I mean, look,
no.
Among the councils where reform has now taken control is Durham, where you are now a councillor. You've got Derbyshire, Kent, Lancashire, Lincolnshire, Nottinghamshire, Staffordshire, others, you know, wrested from, you know, from control of the party to no overall control. But in Durham, are you going to be following that policy announced by Zia Youssef, your party chair, that no flags are going to be flown on any council building unless it's the Union flag or it's the St George's cross, and that's it, de nada, nothing else?
So look, the things like the regimental flags, right? On when we celebrate the Durham Light Infantry, for example, a regiment that's very, very well respected in this part of the world. My grandfather served in the DLI. You know, I would very much be willing to see their flag fly, our county flag, seeing that fly. But what we're talking about here is a political party that finally says that actually councils ought to be flying the flag of our country or our county, not every single activist cause under the sun. You know, you'd think that asking for the Union Jack to actually fly over town halls instead of a flag which I think has become more associated, that rainbow-coloured one, with the mutilation of children, frankly,
Yeah.
Julia, and an ideology that I think has ruined the lives of scores of kids. Reform's plan is actually just about common sense, but instead you get decried with fascism or howls of whatever else. But I actually think that we're on the side of the Brits here, who want to see their institutions that they pay for not turned into progressive propaganda machines.
Yeah, and
that's
divide
what we've seen.
with devices. The whole point of flags is they're supposed to unite us rather than divide us. And again, certainly the rainbow flag I used to think was a flag that was you know, a lovely flag about, you know, about gay pride. But the one they use now is trans. It's Black Lives Matter. It's got everything. It's a blatantly racist and misogynistic flag in my view. I don't want to see it at all. Can I ask about in terms of the threat that reform poses? We were talking earlier in the show about, you know, the game changer results there. You know, it wasn't a majority of council seats in this country. It was only one set of elections. But lots of people were saying how, you know, Nigel Farage made a mistake not downplaying some expectations, as a lot of other parties do ahead of these sort of results, when in fact he massively exceeded them. He would have liked a few more mayoralties, but, you know, he got the Runcorn by-election by 6 votes, the narrowest possible of margins, other than, you know, 1 vote. But in terms of the threat that reform now poses to the other major parties, you know, Labour are sort of second-guessing themselves right now. Tories are second-guessing. There are question marks about Kemi Badenoch's leadership already. She's not even been in the job for a year. Do you think that the threat from reform to the main party system is going to be such that they're going to face the same problem that other parties called hard right or far right across Europe has felt? The National Rally, Marine Le Pen's party. I know very different parties from reform, but some often, you know, talking about policies like anti-net zero and anti-mass immigration. But National Rally and Marine Le Pen being currently banned from standing for the next French presidency, even though she's the odds-on favourite to win it. The AfD, Alternative for Deutschland, over the weekend designated an extremist organisation, even though, of course, huge success in recent parliamentary elections. And we've seen basically the Tories and the Labour leaders equivalent in Germany ganging together to kind of agree, although the first vote has not gone well, for Friedrich Merz to take over as Chancellor, to basically keep the AfD out. Do you think that the Tories and the Labour, rather than cozying up to reform to win votes, are actually more likely to work together to keep you guys out?
Yeah, I mean, look, I certainly think that they're spooked. Let's not beat around the bush. This is an unprecedented win. You know, you're talking actually it being as seismic as a century ago when the Labour Party came into prominence as a real opposition party to the Liberals, for example, back in that political moment. But the knives are obviously out, as you've rightly identified, but it's not for, you know, the wet Blairites running the show or whatever else. The parties are split. Look at the Labour Party. You've got it's split between those who want a form of religious sectarianism in Britain, who do care about net zero and all these other things, and then it's split between wet Blairites who are coming round to the Tony Blair side of the argument, that says net zero is mad and that actually mass migration hasn't worked for us. It's exactly the same, Julia, in the Tory party. I think actually you can identify, without the religious sectarianism element, you can identify a massive split within that party as well. We are the only political party that is actually united on policy positions and as a united front in standing up for what we think is in the best interests of this country. They couldn't organise a piddle-up in a brewery at the moment, I'm afraid. So, you know, we've got to be honest about this. And even if you get rid of Kemi Badenoch, the Tories have proven that they're totally done. They cannot decide who they are, what they're about. The Labour Party, well, they're certainly not for Labour. They're for illegal migrants over anybody up here at this point in time. So I'm disinterested, if I'm brutally honest with you. I don't see them as threats. I see them actually as has-beens. I see them as those who spent 14 years, admittedly the Labour's had 10 months in government already, but what have they shown us? Well, they promised us change. That change has meant mass migration, it's meant net zero on steroids, it's meant stripping pensioners of their winter fuel payments, farmers, family farms being put up for sale because of this inheritance tax that they're now facing. It is a disgrace. If this has changed, Julia, I think we've woken up in some kind of nightmare. I really, really do.
Councillor Darren Grimes, former UK councillor at Durham County Council, thank you for joining us. Tom Slater, he's good, isn't he?
No, absolutely. And congratulations to him on his electoral win. No mean feat.